The first thing to consider, what I had said before, is that this is coming from what we've learned, not necessarily our personal experience, because we haven't managed yet. We haven't managed through a drought. So it's what Greg has taught us as far as how he managed through the worst drought in Missouri's history, sort of his rules of thumb, of tackling that sort of a situation. And it's all going to be related largely towards here in this situation. So as far as like rainfall amounts or temperatures or times of year or durations of drought, that kind of discussion is going to be very localized to here. So you're just going to have to extrapolate to your own environment, so to speak, in your own situation. But I'm sure there's going to be a bunch of this, regardless of where you're at, that's going to bring you some value. So let's start with monitoring, because that's what we were just sort of wrapping up. The first piece is to understand, how do you know if you're in a drought or if you're about to be in one?
So a good practice as a grazer, springtime's around, you're still feeding hay and you're anticipating that new grass. Well, that first paddock when you're, grazing completely grass, you don't have to feed any more hay, you're grazing, you're off and running. That's the paddock you're going to want to monitor both in the drought year and just in general, just to get a baseline for how your grass is doing. So that first paddock the cattle are in, every, let's say, week, maybe 5 days or so, come back to that paddock, measure the height of the grass. Let's say you left it, 8 inches or whatever, 6 inches in the spring, you left 6 inch residual. Then you come back a week later and it's grown an inch or 2 inches or however many. That's going to give you a baseline from year to year as to how well, the grass is coming back and whether you're in a drought or not. So for example, let's say here in Missouri, we've the first paddock we've managed through, we left 6 inches residual. We come back 2 weeks later and there's a 1/2 inch growth. That's a big red flag. There's something going wrong. There's also other pieces that you need to look at too, is one being rainfall. So let's say here in Missouri, let's say you didn't get any rain, you haven't gotten any rain from December and it's already April and it's dry as a bone out there. And you're starting to see also temperatures, another thing to watch. So you're starting to see 80s, 90 degree temperatures in April, May. That's another big red flag. And it's going to be different in your environment depending, north or south, where you're at, east or west, same thing. And so, using those three things, the temperature, the rainfall, and your grass growth, you're going to be able to determine whether you're in a drought or not. And part of it is just, getting that baseline down and understanding from year to year what your grass is doing and how quick it's growing back. But if you get those signals that, oh, my grass really isn't growing, you need to really very quickly make your drought plan or have it in, implement.
Implement it. You should have, and when we say drought plan, it's essentially just a plan of action, right? So if I am indeed seeing the signs of, that's the first part of the plan, is to monitor. If you indeed are checking those boxes of, high temperatures very early in the season, not a lot of rain in the late part of the winter, not a lot of regrowth compared to a normal year. If all those things are sort of starting to line up, the biggest thing with a drought plan is you want to be acting before most people are acting in order to, we'll explain in a minute, but you want to be enacting your drought plan. It's a lot better to enact your drought plan and then it rain 3 weeks later. Then the only thing you've got is too much grass and extra cash in your pocket, which we'll explain in a minute. But so first step, monitor. Like you were saying, if you start checking those boxes, yep, this is looking like it's going to be a drought, you need to start continuing to enact that plan as quickly as you can. And the sort of big overarching thing is you want to be able to extend your rotation around your farm. Let's say in the spring, it takes 30 to 40 days for us to get around the farm. In a drought, like the worst drought Greg's ever experienced was about 120-day rotation, basically, till they got a rain again.
He's tightened them down, sold enough animals, tightened them down enough to make that last.
Exactly. We'll get into it in a second, but yeah, the most important thing is you're trying to match your rotation speed with the amount of recovery time you're going to need, which is going to be whatever. Insert your length of drought, 100 days, 60 days, 120, 300, whatever it is. So how do okay, I've got this many animals. There's two options, right? You can either feed those animals something to supplement them so that you can maintain your herd throughout the drought, right, until the grass starts growing again, or you reduce the number of animals because you have a set amount of feed because it's not growing, and you reduce them enough so that you're able to tighten them down and make your rotation last 120 days or whatever around your farm. Those are your two options, and we were instructed and understand that the option of feeding is not a route you want to go.
As far as like supplemental.
As far as supplemental feeding, as far as hay or anything else, like especially like for what we're talking about grass-based systems. So we're not feeding our cattle grain. That's like a different discussion. But if you're supplementing with hay as like your feed during the year, during the winter or the non-growing season, one of the worst things that you can try to do during a drought is just be like, oh, I'll just hold on to all my animals and just, feed all the hay that I bought for the winter or all the 2-year-old hay I've got lying around or whatever. It's a big mistake. And that was something that I was like, I wouldn't have necessarily intuitively thought that. I'd think, well, I got the animals, like they're more valuable than the hay is. I might as well just feed the hay. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. But we can get into this, but this is like, it's definitely a mistake. So the correct direction is to destock, but we can explain why you shouldn't be feeding that hay. You want to get into that?
The hay. Yeah. So think about it in a drought. So let's say, the previous year you bought your hay at $30, $40 a bale, whatever it's going for in your area. You maybe brought in 100 bales or something. That next year, you've got maybe 50 bales left over from the winter, and you're going into summer, and then it becomes a drought. You're like, oh, I just got these, I still have these 50 bales. I only paid $30-$40 for them. I might as well feed them. It's good value for the drought because I don't have any grass. But what you don't realize is now during that drought, it's harder for farmers to, feed or to make hay because, for one, there's not enough moisture, and then two, everybody's looking for hay because it's a drought. And so the price of hay just skyrockets. Now maybe you're looking at $100, $120 a bale as opposed to $30 to $40. So even though you paid that $30, $40 a bale for these 50 bales, just because it's in a drought, they're now worth $120, what the going rate is for hay. And so if you can get yourself in that mindset that it's not cheap feeding hay, because I bought these cheap, but it's no longer cheap. The hay is no longer cheap. Just so, like, every time you feed a bale during a drought, just think, okay, I'm spending $120. Is this worth it to spend $120 to feed my cattle, or should I, Like, that's the mindset that you should be developing. Mm-hmm. Just because it's just such a... Because, like, a lot of people, well, I'll just feed this hay. It's gonna rain next week. I just know it's gotta rain. It's gotta rain. It's and you just keep feeding the hay, and then eventually you're out of hay. You've got all these hungry animals. You're out of grass. What do? The sale barns are flooded. You're
not even taking cattle.
They're not taking cattle. You're not getting any money for them. You just end up, maybe having to shoot a lot of them or, put them down. It's like just a bad situation to get in. And that's obviously extreme cases. But not still, that it can't happen.
It's going to hurt you financially at the bare minimum. Mm-hmm. And so, like we said, the worst thing is so the proper route is destocking. The worst thing is you destock, it rains 3 weeks later, now you've got way too much grass. Mm-hmm. No one's ever no one's ever like gone out of business because they've got way too much grass, So now with that being said, all right, we understand you monitor, then you start implementing the plan. You don't feed hay, you start to destock. How do you even go about destocking, right? Because there's a process to do this, because there are animals in your herd, and we're coming from a cow-calf seed stock operation. Mm-hmm. There's animals in your herd that are worth a lot more money than other animals. And so the overarching goal through the destocking process is to do it in steps and start with your lowest value animals first, progressing to your highest value animals last.
Your most precious.
And so we'll talk about that. And then also, this is again the reason why you want to be acting early, because you're monitoring, because everything that you're selling, if you can do it early, you're going to be ahead of the curve as far as prices and markets getting flooded. And so if you can be ahead of the curve, those lower value animals are going to bring a higher dollar than if you fed hay, and then you're like, all right, I'm out of grass, and bring them to the sale barn, and then prices are just absolutely in the basement.
If you can even get them
if you can even get them in. But if you can't get them in, you're still going to get absolutely nothing for them. Versus worst case scenario, you destock, sell a bunch of animals, have a little pile of cash sitting there, it rains, you either, I don't know, invest in something on your farm, buy more animals in. I mean, there's a lot of things you can do with some extra cash in the business. So anyway, the process of destocking though.
The first and least valuable animals that you need to get rid of first
in a seed stock enterprise.
In this enterprise is your non-breeding males, so your steers, any male steers, and even if you have some bulls that are breeding animals, but they're not your top bulls, you can get rid of that. Get rid of them too. So steers, extra bulls. You want to hold on to your top 3, 4, depending on your size of your operation. 3, your top, we call them like the macho bulls. Your best of the best.
Your core
that you're going to be breeding with. Those don't get sold, but everything else, every other male can be sold. So that's the first step. The next step is,
well, I guess the first step would be like anything you have on the chopping block as far as a cull. So like anything that you already were like probably gonna bring you to the sale barn or him to the sale barn next week or 2 weeks from now. Like obviously those are the ones you go for first.
You should always have a cull list as to for in the drought situation where you just, okay, these ones need to go, they're gone. And then that gets rid of a chunk of them. And then you go to your steers and your bulls that your non-breeding or your non-priority bulls. Those get gone. Now you're looking at, now what you're left with is your females and your calves. And so, first thing you look at, which is kind of along the cull line, but any pencil-legged heifers, as Greg calls them, any of your lower quality breeding heifers, stuff that's a little bit too leggy that you don't, than you'd like, or, maybe they're not built right, or they got a little bit of a temper, or
they're kind of scrawny, or something.
Like if they have like knocks against them, you can get rid of the heifers or younger cows. And then the next thing you look at is older cows. Anything 8, 9, 10-year-old cow. Yeah, she's still a good cow, but she's starting to come out of her prime. You've got younger ones on the way up, so then they go first. So your objective is, one, to keep your breeding bulls, because you need those, because you need to be able to breed your cows. But the most valuable animals that you can hold on to is your top heifers. Like that's the most valuable thing. You do not want to. I mean, that's like last resort break into. That's like when you just have no grass.
Heifers
and you have to get out of.
Heifers and like really young cows.
Like young breeding females. And like prime breeding females, like your best of your best. Those are what you want to hold on to as much as you can. But that's kind of the progression. Your culls, your steers, your non-necessary bulls. Pencil-legged heifers, old cows. Then you just kind of work down, and at that point you're going to be pretty well destocked. Like that
should be down to.
You only need to do like depending on your situation. You only need to destock to the point where you can make that rotation last long enough to get through the drought.
And you can go and obviously the more there's like different schools of thought, because like the more you sell in the beginning, the better price you're going to be if the drought continues to happen. You could take the mindset of, I'm going to do it in stages where I'll take out 10% or whatever, or 20%, and then just see what happens, and then sell another 10 or another 20 or whatever, and just keep parsing it down until you're going to be fine for the rest of the summer, basically, if that's how extreme the drought's going to be. And in this part of the country, that's really, 120 days is the worst one that's ever happened. And so, because when the fall rolls around, it's just the way that the weather pattern works in this part of the world, you will get moisture. It is unprecedented for it to just continue to roll through like a whole year. But then there's parts of the country where there's like 450-day droughts
or
600-day droughts. Yeah, exactly. Like multiple years without proper precipitation. And that's a totally different beast that we're not really equipped to handle as far as our experience or what we've been taught. But those are sort of the overarching themes. And so essentially what's going to happen is if you properly destock, you're going to be able to make it through the drought. Because the other thing that happens during a drought is in this part of the country, because is so much rain, we grow a ton of grass, but the grass is lower quality grass because it's
washy.
People will say washy because there is so much moisture, the grass is not really stressed very much, and so there's a very little mineralization and phytochemical production happening in the grass, which makes it a lot more nutrient dense and satiating for the animal. And so they need a lot more grass in normal circumstances to do well compared to out west where they get a lot less rain, but the quality of that grass is a lot higher. And so in a drought, you almost get that like western grass situation in the middle of Missouri or somewhere that it doesn't usually happen because all that grass is so stressed from so little rain that all those phytochemicals and nutrients and stuff start to really intensify in that grass, so that actual amount of feed that the animal requires is less, because it's like eating a really high quality like protein bar or like meal replacement shake or something like that.
You get
full and it's not that much volume. But if you eat a bag of potato chips, like you could eat 2 bags of potato chips without even blinking, you know, and it's like so much volume, but it's just not very good quality.
Another thing too is the parasite load just drops dramatically when in a drought.
Almost no pink eye.
There's no moisture. Same with the pink eye. Same with the flies.
Yeah.
Like a lot of problems just disappear during a drought.
So your animals will actually probably look, if you've destocked appropriately and they're getting enough feed, they're going to look phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like during the drought, even though there's going to be less of them. So that also will allow you, because of that, to tighten them up more than you otherwise would be able to, because there's almost more like usable feed per unit area than during normal circumstances, which is kind of handy. So you are able to tighten them down as well as sell off a lot of animals. And then you just cruise your way through that drought. You're going to have a pile of cash sitting there because you offloaded a ton of animals at the beginning of the drought. And then when the rain comes again, you can either just wait and let that core like build itself back out from that core genetics of your top breeding males and your top breeding females, or you can do what Greg did, which is go to another producer that has some extra stuff for sale.
Seed stock.
The good seed stock. Maybe he was just a little bit outside of the drought, so it didn't get quite as hard hit as you did, and just buy in some fresh genetics and let that sort of mix in and grow your herd out. So.
That is the cool thing about that, though, about keeping your, whittling your herd down and then growing from there, is it's like almost like a fast track to get to the quality you need.
Yep.
You're just trimming off all the junk and then you start from a better point.
Yeah. And the amount of revenue you'll generate is going to decrease as a result, but potentially in the future it'll be higher because you have a higher quality product to sell. It's kind of interesting.
Another thing I wanted to say too is this works very well for a seed stock operation. As far as like a grass fed, if you're doing like grass fed beef.
Yep.
I don't really know the answer to if you need to bring in 12 steers a week or something
for your customer base or
throughout the summer.
Supermarkets,
I don't know what. You're definitely gonna have to kind of twist and turn it around to fit your operation. But some of these principles, especially like the feeding the hay, is a big one. You're monitoring. Yeah. Monitoring, knowing what your situation is. Being early.
Yeah. Maybe you can line up. I mean, now I know it's kind of crazy with butcher dates and stuff, but maybe you could line up, a bunch of early butcher dates, stuff that might not be quite there, and just have more ground beef than you otherwise would.
Yeah.
Just, because you're butchering animals that aren't quite finished or whatever, but at least you're going to have some product, and you might be able to charge more for it because nobody else that's supplying your area has it.
Because they weren't prepared. Because they weren't prepared. Sell their animals to sale barn.
Yeah. So, but this is just pure speculation. We're just shooting from the hip, so to speak. But I don't know. You have any other thoughts about like, I don't know, like if you're raising, whatever, grass-fed beef operation during drought, or I don't know. I mean, like, what do you think?
I just have a question. In terms of like, so that quality of feed goes up, right?
Yeah.
Let's say you're doing a grass-fed operation. Would those steers turn out better because they have?
Maybe.
Like, would it be? You're talking about maybe selling them for a premium because nobody else has them, but it would also probably be better quality meat.
It probably
right?
tastes better. Yeah.
I wonder.
don't know. I don't know how much fat you'd put on. But I mean, I guess if you had a lot of, if you had plenty of feed, there's no reason why they wouldn't. You know.
I wonder if you could like send out 30% of your herd somewhere where there's not a drought and like have them custom graze
Custom
it for
graze
you.
them?
You know,
Yeah,
I
interesting.
wonder if it'd be worth it as
Yeah.
far as keeping your.
Especially if it's a
market.
localized drought. Like
Yeah,
say like
yeah,
you in
yeah.
Michigan like had a drought and you could send it to
Stuff like middle Indiana.
yeah or something like that.
Central
Exactly.
Indiana or something.
Like not
and
a
they
crazy.
like you just pay them this rate per day and they can finish them out for you. I mean it obviously.
You'd have to do the math
You'd have
just
to
to
make sure.
figure out like economically how that's going to pan out versus trying to sell them. But that might be a good
Yeah.
play.
Just because then you still have got the
Animals.
animals, because maybe you can raise your prices up because it's a drought.
Yeah.
Just be real with your customers. This is part of life. Nature has its way of
Can't raise beef without water.
exactly, and so just being real, and maybe you're able to then charge a little more to then make it, make sense. Be like, okay, if you want your beef, we've got to charge more just because of these situations, and make it work that way. I don't know.
They might start donating to your cause. Who knows?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or when you have beef again, they're gonna buy the crap out of it because they know you like went through that
Yeah.
trial by fire, so to speak.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Or
This
even
is just ideas. We're just
just throwing it out there.
I don't
If
know.
anyone's got direct experience out there with raising grass-fed beef, that's the central piece of your operation during an extreme drought, I'd be interested. Throw it in the comments. Throw it in the questions. Get in contact with us. I'd be interested to hear some thoughts.
It's super.
Yeah.
We're both kind of really wanting to.
Yeah.
Really interested in the whole grass-fed beef side of it too. Just all three of us just learning.
It's just another piece, you know. It's like another piece to the puzzle.
Yeah.
So
another kind of thing we don't really deal with or see.
Yeah.
So
for sure. Well, you want to jump into some questions potentially if there's anything out there.
Let's just wrap up.
Let's
drought.
recap. Yeah.
Monitoring your rainfall, your moisture, and your grass growth in the original paddock.
Yeah.
Rainfall, temperatures, and your grass growth.
Grass growth's the most important one.
Yep.
Yeah.
Those three are your key indicators as to a drought. In the springtime. So you monitor, and if you notice you're becoming into a drought, you need to destock. That's your next rule of order. And in the destock order, culls, then to steers, then to secondary bulls, then to your pencil-legged heifers, then to your older cows, old grandma cows, and then your core group of heifers and young cows, young breeding females is your prized possession.
And prime breeding males.
And your prime.
But if you have to, if it was gun to your head and you had to choose between your prime breeding females and your prime breeding males,
get rid of the males.
Get rid of the males because they don't give you a calf every year.
Mm-hmm.
So you could try to source a bull from somewhere.
But that's like extreme case.
Yeah.
Like
man, I don't want to think about it.
I don't know if you get to that point.
Yeah, at that point you might be out of the cow business.
Maybe, but like at that point, like you just keep 2 bulls and maybe you sell 2 bulls is not that much more. So you just hold on to those 2 best bulls.
Yep.
And then it might be worth selling 2 of the worst of the best heifers just to hold on to those genetics.
Yeah.
I don't know.
But anyway, that's basically it. And it's just always about it's about being early. It's better to destock.
Don't feed hay.
Yeah, don't feed hay. It's about being early, and it's better to destock than feed hay, and it's better to have too much grass because it rained 3 weeks after you sold a bunch of stuff off. Mm-hmm. That's a way better scenario than feeding hay, praying for a rain. It doesn't happen. Bring stuff to the sale barn. They won't even take it. If they do take it, they're giving you like two pennies and telling you to, turn around. It's a terrible situation. Yeah. So just be proactive and have a plan. Just feeding hay.
We forgot the important part. Take a vacation.
Take a vacation.
That's a big one in the summertime. So in the drought of 2012, Greg and Jan, they had interns. I think it was Meg and someone else.
Yeah.
And they.
If you guys are out there, let us know who it was.
Greg set up like 25 paddocks ahead of time, and then him and Jan just left and went to New Zealand.
New Zealand for 3 weeks.
Yeah, for 3 weeks.
Almost a month.
During the heat of the drought, and And in New Zealand, he's like, it rained every day.
Every single day.
And he was just like, I mean, it was good for him. It was good for both of them to get that break away from the farm, get that break from the stress, and just kind of recoup and come back at it. And he said he came back that, after his vacation, the cattle had looked phenomenal because because of the highly mineralized grass, and they were getting, enough to eat, and they were still moving, and they were super, still super content, and they made it through the drought, and he was a lot better. He had a lot better perspective and mentality going into it from that vacation. So that's an important one. And you don't have to take a 3-week vacation
to New Zealand.
But
you can even just taking a weekend.
Yeah, just going to a cabin in the woods somewhere and just
somewhere where it's raining. No.
Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, but just getting your mind refreshed so that you can deal with it, because it's definitely one of those things where it's just a stress. Like, it's like a constant stress of like making sure you're making the right decisions, making sure that your animals are going to be okay, making sure you are going to be okay financially. It's a lot. And so just taking that time to reset gives you a little bit of rejuvenated energy to attack it again when you come back. So yeah, because a lot of people will get into the trap of, oh, I can't leave, stuff's going on. If you left for a day, nothing will go to hell in a handbasket. I mean, as long as you like Greg said, he set up a bunch of paddocks for his interns to make sure they were all set and knew what the drill was, and off you went. So
you could even give your cattle 2 days worth.
2 days worth of forage, and
give them that and leave and come back. It's not going to hurt the cattle. It's not really going to hurt the cattle, and it's going to be so beneficial to your own mental state
that it will end up benefiting the cattle, because you're going to be making clear, more thought out decisions that are not just full of emotion because you're all drawn down from dealing with the drought so much. So yeah, we almost forgot that. That was one of the most important points. Yeah. So there you go. Have a plan. Don't pray for rain.
Yeah, that's a bad trap to be in.
Yeah.
Oh, it's got to rain. It's got to rain next week. It's got to rain.
Yeah.
Can't be a drought this long.
Yeah.
Just hold on a little bit longer. A little bit longer. Pretty soon your cattle look like skeletons, and you're out of grass, and you're having to put them down because you can't bring them to the sale barn. It's a bad place to be.